I'm Celina. Thank you all for coming here to spend a portion of your Friday evening with us for a 3-day weekend, which you guys will hopefully be really productive doing stuff online or wherever. I work over at the VCU Library, James Rich Travel Library and Special Collections, and I do Richmond Zine Fest and Girls Rock RVA, and I also help out with Art Mafia here. So just a few words on the topic. As you can tell, like everybody here, how many of you guys are like on Facebook or some form of social media, right? So like we started after the last year's panel, we started talking throughout the summer about like our reliance on various modes of communication online, either of our work or our social lives, and sometimes with a bit of resentment, sometimes with a bit of like love for like the things that we were able to do and the people we were able to connect with, and then with the invention of like Google Glass and like digital currency like Bitcoins, and we started getting to like the complicated issues with like the ethics of living our lives online and digitally. What does that mean for access, and what are the costs of that, like ethically and culturally? And it kind of just inspired us to create this panel, and hopefully it will lead to the creation of some art later on in the semester. And in case you were wondering about the name Digital, the idea of it was like, it's not Digital, in case you were wondering who is Digital. It's going along with the phrase et al. Is and others. Let's see. So let me go ahead and introduce the panelists here. I'll start with the one closest to me. I have one here. Okay. Zenzile Sky Lark, right here, is an all-encompassing visualist with a strong emphasis in design and photography. She graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University with a BFA in graphic design in 2012 and has 7 years of professional experience in designing interactive and print material for the culinary, fashion, STEM, pharmaceutical, and industrial arts industries. She lives life through immense floods of color and abnormal form while submersing herself in positive sensation through music, visual stimulation, and enjoying the perks of everyday life. She enjoys learning new technological techniques, networking, documenting, culinary arts, aromatic dark roasts, exotic loose teas, travel, summertime breezes, fashion, and collecting interesting knickknacks along her way. Zenzile is currently freelancing along the East Coast and travels frequently between New York City and Richmond, Virginia. Right next to Zenzile, we have Cristina Dominguez Ramirez. She's a library community services manager for the Broad Oak branch of the Richmond Public Library, which will be reopening.
Well, it's a special secret, but yeah, it's not
we'll be opening.
We're going to be opening on Sundays. We're going to be the first public library in the region, Central Virginia, to have Sunday hours. So
Cool. And she serves on the governing body of the American Library Association as counselor at large, chair for the Multicultural Forum of the Virginia Library Association, and national member at large for Reforma, which is the National Association to promote library and information sciences to Latinos and the Spanish-speaking. Locally, she serves on the boards of Family Lifeline as vice president to the Friends of La Plaza Latin Market and the Virginia Center for Latin American Art. Previously, she has served as adjunct faculty at the Catholic University School of Library and Information Science and as faculty academic librarian with the Social and Behavioral Science Collections, as the Social and Behavioral Sciences Collections Librarian at Virginia Commonwealth University. Titles are long. She earned a BS in Honor Psychology, a BA in Philosophy and Religious Studies from Louisiana State University, an MA in Middle Eastern Studies from the University of Texas in Austin, an MSLS from the Catholic University of America, an MPA from VCU, and is currently working towards a PhD in Research and Program Evaluation from VCU. As you can tell, she's a go-getter. And as such has been named one of the top 40 under 40 in 2013 and graduate of the Leadership Metro in Virginia. And she was just accepted in the class of 2015 for the Initiatives of Change Community Trust Building Fellowship, and is currently launching a side consulting business called CDR Consulting, which will work on diversity, inclusion, and outreach issues for libraries, government, and nonprofits, and for-profit organizations. Yes. One pause. Yeah.
Is that seat?
That seat is available. Empty seats
And then
are.
also suited on the floor.
This is a tight space. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about down here?
No. Is that chair with a book bag on it?
Two people could sit down here.
You feel like 10?
Yeah, we can move back. Yeah, we'll move back.
Yeah.
Okay, how's that?
Feel the love room, nice and close. Are we good? Okay. The next person on the panel is Dana Ollestad, and he's a multimedia artist and curator currently based in Richmond, Virginia. His work presents seemingly simple gestures that facilitate experience and encounter using participation of the audience to create open-ended structures that may be influenced but never fully controlled. And then we have Mr. John Glover. John Glover wears many hats, figuratively and literally, although not today. Not literally. He's VCU Library's Humanities Research Librarian, which means he's the GSEX librarian over at Cabell. So if you ever are doing some research, you'll probably end up talking to him. He's a great resource over there. He co-founded Digital Pragmata, the library's program on the digital arts and humanities. And he's been blogging and on social media on various platforms for a decade. He publishes fiction, nonfiction, and other work as J.T. Glover. And he's a member on the board of directors for the James River Writers, and he also paints and makes digital art in his spare time. And Brian. He's like nervous. What am I going to say? Brian, he's a fellow Richmond Zine Fest organizer and a VC graduate in international studies with a concentration in film studies. When he sent me his bio, he said, "Long-time file share. I guess that's why I'm here." Well, sort of. Which is ever so humble. I want to add that he also makes zines. A few that are really awesome are Too Far Too Late, which is a punk audio zine from Richmond, Virginia. Sometimes if you go to house shows or any sort of show, if you see Brian there, you might see him with a recorder in a sock. So if you see someone with a sock, it's not weird. There's probably a recorder in it. And a zine called 3/17/2013, where he collected all of his text messages, Facebook interactions from a single day. I call it the Stalk Brian zine. And a time-shifting zine in which he reviews rare VHS films and interviews the creators of said films. And last but not least, we have Nelly Kate via satellite, aka FaceTime. She's a Richmond-based artist and musician who works to engage the public and the urbanscape through site-specific interventions of sound, video, and print. The aesthetic of her performances, recordings, and film scores are minimal and intimate layers of radio frequencies, field recordings, Casio tones, and deft lyrical vocal arrangements. Recent opportunities have included residencies at the Black Iris Gallery, Studio Q3, collaborations with Benjamin Thorpe, Jordan Brunner, Leslie Rogers, and Dave Watkins, installations and performances at Anderson Gallery, Black Iris Gallery, and Cork, speaking engagements in classes, panels at Bridge, PAI, American University, VCU, and screening a piece at TEDx RVA. She has shared the stage with artists such as Stephen Vitellio, Molly Berg, Tune Yards, Angel Olsen, Div, The Soul and the Sun, Tickly Feather, and Pattern is Movement. Currently, she is finalizing stereo mixes of Low Frequency Travel Agency with Benjamin Thorpe and collaborating with Jonathan Lee on a dance score, as well as a bunch of other things. So, yay. So I'm going to get to the questions, and hopefully the goal is that we'll have time for Q&A and perhaps additional questions that the panelists may find that they have for each other or for you guys in the audience as well. And how fitting that we have someone from remote, considering the topic that wasn't planned, but we're going to pretend that it was. So I'm going to ask the questions kind of out of order. Sorry for the confusion if you guys have your notes. But the first one is, how would you define digital space and digital access? And whoever feels comfortable hopping out there first, go ahead. Are you hearing us okay, Nelly?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So you're saying as digital space as in anything that could be
Digital space as in, well, it depends on
anything that like
internet or how you define it.
So I kind of what I kind of wrote down is that digital space as opposed to the space that we describe as space, what we exist in.
Can everyone hear Brian well?
Sorry.
Sorry.
I kind of reflected upon the idea of like a world in which we live in where we don't live in atoms, but we live in like bits, which and that there's no physical construct of it, but it's just as what we assume is endless, and we reflect on the universe being endless as much as we expect the internet and digital technology to also be sort of endless, which is kind of just as scary to think about. So that was my digital space and reflection of this.
How? I just want to make sure. Can everyone hear okay?
Can you speak louder?
A little louder.
I'm so sorry. I'm nervous. So yeah, just a world in which we live in which we don't live in atoms like we have for millions of years, but we live in bits, which is the electronic signals in which how the internet works and how binary code exists, zeros and ones, and it's just as endless as the universe in which Stephen Hawking explores, but in a different kind of ways. Like I said, it's just as scary and kind of bizarre to think about, but it's a brand new space that we can inhabit.
It's funny you talk about sort of living in bits as opposed to atoms, because I tend to think about this stuff in terms of the interface. Right? I think about the keyboards, I think about the speakers and things like that. And we all think. I mean, when I saw this question, I was like, "Oh, internet! Whoa, living online! Blah blah blah." It isn't necessarily right. I mean, the digital tool. I mean, I remember back before the web, more or less. And I remember having the computer and the little box, and it could do all sorts of stuff. And to me, I mean, I was greater without the computer. I mean, I was able to wander around the world and do this and that. And then I sat down at the computer and I put things on disks and sent them places and did things with them. And now in the online stuff, we just kind of assume, okay, well, it's all part of one big world, but there's still that box that my stuff is sitting in at home or over there at Capitol Library or wherever. And I don't know that that's a good or a bad thing either way, but I think about it sometimes with art installations, like if just walking at the BMFA, right? I mean, there's the running loop of the Buddha face, right? If you all know the about, right? So I mean, that's not, as far as I know, connected to the internet out there. It's just this loop, it's continuous, it's digital, but it isn't reaching out anywhere, it's just this closed space. And so, at that point, safety, what do you say about that?
Digital space, yeah, I guess I sort of kind of adopted Ryan's outlook a little bit better, or analogous to that, I guess. I thought of the web, I thought of like digital space, digital access. I just thought of like, where you put your files. Like, it's easy to put cloud, it's easy to put online, and then access. I just thought of like, I immediately thought of like how internet access is being sort of fought for like one of the human rights. That's sort of on the table. A lot of governments now. Like, it's like, yeah, is internet access like a human right? It's like life, love, and pursuit of happiness.
Oh, that's a perfect segue. For what I'd like to say is, after having been an academic librarian for almost 7 years and now running a public library and really being in the trenches with what I consider real Richmond, people who are struggling to make ends meet, people who have limited access to transportation, to technology, to purchasing resources to enable them to live in this digital space and have the digital access. I look at things through the lens of finances, resources, and access, and I think that going on what you were saying is a right. The gap is so massive now between those who can inhabit the space and who have access to the technology and the skills to manipulate that space, and those who do not, that I'm afraid, because it's an ever-growing gulf. And I work with people every day that I help them just to learn how to manipulate a mouse, let alone how to create digital media. So that kind of scares me in terms of where we're heading with our future. And because that's really the community that's trying to find jobs, that's trying to help their kids, and feel like they can't even help their own children succeed in school.
Yeah, I was just thinking about digital space, and I was thinking about how big your audience can get, because when things are digital, more people are able to see, more people are able to have the same sort of experience. So to me, it's a sort of big world, and it's a big environment, and everybody's able to get to it easier. But I still think that in some way it's a problem, because everything becomes kind of generalized, and everyone's kind of going towards this trend where everything is just done the same way. And so I feel like a lot of the internet interfaces kind of make it so that everyone's kind of losing a sense of individuality. And this is going towards terms of art. And so I think that it's kind of like a catch-22. It's working for us, but it's also tearing down these other constructs of how people are thinking on their own.
Do you have anything you want to add, Nelly?
Yeah, I think that something for me that is really fundamental is the difference between the kind of tactile quality that we experience in everyday life versus the digital space, but how even though our experience of digital space is kind of mediated by two-dimensional screens, and that experience feels limited to that there is the whole dimension and depth to the world of the internet, and also other digital interfaces that we interact with, and what kinds of opportunities that affords for everyone, whether it's for purposes of creativity or for just interacting with other people. And so I don't know who made the comment about the access that people have to those resources, but I think that's a really important topic within the conversation. You'll have to forgive me because I feel I can hear you guys pretty well, but it comes in and out of being really clear. I will try not to be off in the ether.
I think that's pretty interesting, and I feel like ties into what you were saying. Like, does digital space stop at the screen? And you're talking about this. I'm gonna touch this. Sorry.
Well,
digital space is here, but without this, what does that mean to the digital space? Is it gone now? Mm-hmm. Is this part of the digital space, the thing?
The thing. Talking about tactility was it's exciting if you think about things like the Google Art Project or stuff like that, and where you've got this really, honestly, kind of like this perverted experience where you can get deep into brush strokes, and you can see paint levels and things like that, and you can see things that you were never supposed to see. Ever. It's like,
That's true.
or like art. I think about like classical art. Greek and Roman and like Trajan's column and gigantic monuments that historians have studied for years, like via these casts and these drawings and so on and so forth. In real life, these things are 100, 200 feet up in the sky. Nobody ever saw these things that close. Likewise, I mean, what does it mean to look at Starry Night and see like that depth of impossible? I mean, most of us are never going to see it in person. So, yeah, I totally like the way that it's sort of bounded there.
I think, okay, I'm just, I don't want to like stop the flow of conversation, but it kind of ties into the second question. When I think it was Cristina and several of you guys touched on access, but what is like the cost of digital space, like mentally, financially, culturally, ethically, like do we, in order to gain things, what are we giving up or assuming, perhaps?
You mean is that the question? Who's being preserved and doing the preserving?
The cost of digital space.
Yeah. Spoilers.
I wrote down that culturally, like you were saying, how it does create a real gap, and the more we do, Western, like a privileged culture dives into digital space, the more we're leaving a lot behind that's really not politically correct, or it's really troubling. And I think so. As far as a cost, it's just cost as in like
Well, I think knowledge transmission, historical transmission, story transmission, I see the cost as being how so many voices are unrepresented in that preservation and in that transmission. You have entire communities that, for a number of reasons, are not being able to preserve their culture, their histories, the way they see the world, because they don't have the privilege. I look a lot of things through that lens, and that's why I'm trying to build up some programs to help Latino and African American youth learn how to manipulate media, learn how to tell their stories, and share it with community members, because that's one of the few avenues that they will have to share that and to be able to learn the technology, because for them there's really no avenues, and that's a shame that their stories are not held maybe on the same scale as people in the privileged class, and so they don't have the means to preserve their history or their version of the history, as opposed to normative history that was.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend like an entire year talking about like the mental cost of digital space. In August 2013, the University of Michigan published a report saying that in general, Facebook users were more sad than non-Facebook users. I actually wrote down the quote. They noted declines in moment-to-moment happiness and overall life satisfaction, which is kind of terrifying when you think of, oh, bye, Nelly. It's happening already. Exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
The pitfalls of digital access.
Yeah, well, we get Nelly back. I mean, it's kind of terrifying to have like a university come back with that result saying like, hey, Facebook makes people sadder. And then to realize that there's 1.1 billion users, that's a whole lot of sad people. That's helpful. Anyways, that's something, a statistic that I thought was really interesting.
Maybe another cost is to sort of to build on what you were saying, Cristina, about, fundamental kind of digital divide questions. Like, oftentimes I think we wind up helping people who have already been helped.
Yes.
I mean, it's real easy to scale somebody from, it's easier to go from MS Paint to Paint.net to Photoshop than to go from 0 to anything. And that's my experience, like as a learner and as a teacher. So a lot of, and the money goes that way too, frankly. Grants, I mean, there are grants that are targeted at fundamental development, but many large funding agencies are in the position of giving funding to people who put together a great application, well documented, that takes time, dozens or hundreds of hours to put together. And if you don't have the time.
And a grant specialist.
And yeah, right. Come on, I mean, how many people out there have grant specialists that aren't already horribly well funded?
I think we're in this like society that we're in right now. It's just a really assuming society where everything is like updating constantly, and so it kind of leaves a lot of people outside of that, and especially people that are older. And it's just assumed that you're supposed to be following all these steps and these technologies updating like every day. And I'm a web designer, and I have to constantly keep on top of every code that comes out to make sure that I'm following with the standards. And so it's just a standard that just keeps getting higher. And if you're not quick enough, I feel like those people are just left behind, and they're trying, but everything's just moving so fast and it just doesn't make any sense. So I feel like it's really assuming like, oh, you're supposed to be doing this, you're supposed to have these devices, this is where we're going now. So it makes it a lot harder for a lot of people to keep up to date and even want to be able to learn, because everything moves so fast. We're like, oh, I'll never be able to keep up with this, so why is there any use of me going forward with this?
We get it?
Zenzile, I thought it was really, it's interesting to think about what sometimes older people experience with learning. I'm thinking here of colleagues I have here and elsewhere who sometimes maybe they're 20 years older than I am, and they are much, much quicker with computers than I am. And their quality of knowing sometimes seems a lot more fundamental than mine. Like when you learn a language, like if you learn natural, it's kind of like that, whatever, but like when you actually learn the subjunctive and the participle, anything. Do you talk to people who have like that kind of learning experience, like more like pride in their root level knowledge because they can put harder?
Yeah, I definitely feel that there's a difference with, just like what you're saying with the languages, someone that's kind of starts out younger and they're learning it along the way rather than someone that's kind of forced to learn something. And so I've come to that in my own experience with forcing myself to learn different types of code. And just with web design, it's not just one code, there's a bunch of different codes that I have to keep up with. And so in that kind of way, I feel like it was a lot harder for me to keep up because even though I was passionate about it, there are these other things that I didn't know I had to attain. And so that journey just got that much more difficult for me because I didn't expect all these other, paths to take to get to, the center. So I do feel like there is a difference.
Nelly, we were still on I don't know what you were able to catch, but we were still on the cost of digital space question. I don't know if you...
Yeah. I didn't get to catch very much of what was being said by the other panelists. The things that I kind of think about those costs may be things that I reiterate of what they've already said, but I kind of think about the way that our energies get dispersed because of living in a cellular culture and interacting with digital media so much, and how interruptive we've become as a culture. And so while I admire all the things that it affords us, I also recognize that there are some weaknesses to the way that it affects us socially. So that was something that I had thought about, how dispersed that we get and how our attentions are dispersed, and and what that does to our sense of identity as individuals and in the greater context of society.
That actually hadn't been touched on, at least not in that phrasing. I mean, just walking down the street, you see like people with their phones in their hand, and they're not looking around them. Some even like practically walking into traffic. So that's a very, very good point. And kind of might change and go, since we're kind of flowing in this direction, what do you guys think about the relationship between technology and accessibility? Like when, like how does like technology reinforce or create these boundaries? If, like both in our social interactions and also like as just people when we like create artwork or when we are doing our work or in the expectations of like the everyday or goals or responding to emails, like with some examples to toss out there, like how do you guys cope with that? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I just had an experience earlier today with the troubles of technology, because I'm a remote worker. I work remotely for Johnson & Johnson in New York. And so as one of their designers, I have all of my artwork on the cloud, and that's the only way we can get things back and forth. And so since I'm in Virginia and they're in New York, there's not a lot of physical files that go back and forth. Everything's on this cloud. And so today, my cloud crashed, and this project that was very, very time sensitive and important and it cost a lot of money had to be put on hold for the next month because it has to be redone all over again. And so I feel like there's a lot of, just as accessible as it is, there's a lot of hindrance as to how things can just disappear just like that. Just, my whole project was just gone. And like these things like Dropbox and things like this are supposed to be reliable. Like when you sign up for it, your files are going to be here forever, they say. But in reality, they're just as, like easy to disappear as something that catches on fire, like a piece of artwork or something that, becomes war damage. It seems just, as, scary to me. And I have things backed up on multiple hard drives just to make sure. But I never feel safe because everything is just like subject to, be lost in the universe. So I feel like there's a lot of like push and pull of how I feel about how sturdy, technology is right now.
For me, I kind of before mentioned a little bit about the gap and how that scared me in terms of people being equipped with the skill set they need. But I also am hopeful because what I'm seeing in the relationship between technology and accessibility is while a lot of the immigrant children from the communities I work with, parents may have language barriers, may have barriers with technology and finances, the children are all connected on social media. They all know how to use smartphones. So that I feel like is kind of a pathway to start building up those communities, because if I can get through the teens and the kids and already their love of social media, their love of technology, and then maybe help bring that back to the communities, I feel that that can actually provide accessibility to many more people than through formal education or training, which we have limited availability to do that, given resources like financial and time. But if we can show the young generation how to use this and how to bring that back, kind of a train the trainer, that actually gives me hope in terms of giving that skill set to a whole community that may still not know how to use it in English, but can use it in Spanish or in indigenous languages. So that gives me a lot of hope, and I think that's exciting. And I saw, I don't have the statistic on hand, but a large percentage of Latino immigrant youth are connected online, even if they don't know how to use more traditional technology that we offer them, they still are all online. And so that is kind of a pathway right there.
I would agree, and I was, when I thought about technology and accessibility, I didn't necessarily just think about digital technology, but just technology going back hundreds of years to like the idea of the printing press, of course, and the accessibility of books and education and reading, and how it grew slowly, but it did grow and it developed, where I guess we are today in some way. And I thought that I agree that I think cell phones in particular are an extremely easy way to be connected online. It's like now, and I think I've heard before, I can't use facts, but a lot of like non-Western countries, having a cell phone is your easiest way to being on the internet. So in the way they're developing, I can do as much on my cell phone almost as a computer. I mean, and so it's something that you don't necessarily have to have even a home. You can, I think even in Richmond, there's a lot of homeless people who have cell phones who are connected digitally and using internet and Facebook and all the whatever websites and stuff that and using them probably efficiently and it can be a lot of it can be helpful. I mean, in one way that you look at it can be helpful for their accessibility to.
I'm gonna ask you to expand, Brian. So, like in your bio, I touched on your file sharing and like and like the accessibility of like those sort of options to, I guess like gain like in a way kind of like almost like an activist way like free resources. Like how like is that do you feel like that is an accessible way of like operating, considering like some of that's kind of like buried or concealed, this other like layer of the internet, secret clubs?
Yeah, while they can be off limits, but not off limits to those who want to be there. I guess even if you have the privilege to have a computer at the time, then I don't know. I attribute a lot of my file sharing, and I have friends across the world on the internet through chat rooms and stuff like that, and I attribute a lot of my knowledge of pop culture, my study of film, is largely attributed to downloading film that aren't accessible in Google ways, and so I'm bringing it around to you being scared that files are disappearing or can disappear. I found that when I come across something, a DVD or a VHS that I want to not be gone, I've put it on the internet to be shared. And when I put it on the internet to be shared for free, the people downloading it aren't people who want to make money off it. It's people who want to watch it or listen or read it, whatever. People who want to keep it around. And so it makes me feel that if my computer ever died, I could find it and bring that file right back to me, because I know I've let 100 people download it from me. And while this isn't something and that a lot of people who want to make money off films and things, etc., do not exactly, obviously not happy about it. They'd rather you purchase it. I think people really look in the short term of that, in that we live in a world where everything past 1923 can be copyrighted, and that's like what are your favorite films before 1923? I mean, maybe, but you know what I mean is that, and copyrights have grown from 28 years initially to 120 years is the current copyright for anything produced, and it's growing more and more because of Disney and stuff like that. And I think in 100, 150 years, the world will be completely different in the way we look at downloading and distribution of art and the price of art. And I think that just right now it's kind of like a really gray area, but I think file sharing is something that will be thinked maybe in the future, that things even still exist, that the analog product won't exist anymore.
And I like your idea of distributed knowledge, that you don't have to have one person be the sole repository or one group of people of a particular genre or type of film. You actually can have pockets in different countries that are communicating with each other, and that's really exciting too, because there's that redundancy, so you do protect against loss of that information.
With less politics of what deserves to be preserved.
On the other side, but I come more from where you are. With, I have lost more digital photos, more files, more digital everything in my life than I've ever lost or had destroyed analog objects. I mean, I can count, and no, I'm a librarian, but true confessions time here, like, I am not super organized. So, I can find it. I have it, I know where it is, and I've never, like the thread of the book being, like, okay, I've been lucky enough not to have it the house letter, right? Like, but at the same time, like, leaving that aside, books are still around. I know where they are. I don't know. How about you? Are you better with, like?
So all of my digital stuff is backed up on the cloud. I pay. So every file that I create on my computer gets sent as soon as I create it, and it's just, I guess, just the way I think. Is that I like that I could download a Word document I made this morning. I can download it onto my phone. So it's just like maybe a little scared. Maybe people aren't comfortable letting a company into your lives like that, or however much of your life is on your computer. But I find the safety in that if my laptop got stolen, I could create the exact same laptop. I don't know, because I find comfort in that, and I like my computer. Maybe, I don't know. But as far as personal stuff, I mean, I guess the idea is that, that stuff if you wanted to share your photos around the internet, perhaps it wouldn't, if you want to be like, hey, you guys want to download and keep them on your hard drive? A weird idea. Maybe no one wants to do it for you, but that's more so my idea is that, people will preserve what they want to preserve. And that's kind of where I'm coming from, I guess.
I'm kind of curious how many, just because we have Nelly here with us, how many musicians are in the room that like make tracks and share them online? Just a few.
It's like scared to raise their hand.
Yeah, so I'm going to put you on the spot, Nelly, just because I know you a bit. You make incredible music. What's your distribution method, and what's your take on people sharing your music, and do you even charge for your music, or what's that look like for you?
The approach that I've taken has been, I've tried to be pretty open-minded about it, and I sort of view it as a social experiment. A lot of times, when I distribute music in person, I allow for it to be on a sliding scale, and I find that sort of approach to economy is actually better for me and better for my work. But on the internet, I think that the way that my music is set up on Bandcamp is through a record label that distributed tapes for me, and then my own site. And I don't remember if my Bandcamp is set up with a fixed price or if I have it also on a sliding scale, because I make maybe one sale a month, and that's great, but it hasn't become something that I have to be constantly concerned about, because I would rather have it out there than worry too much about the money that it makes, because I think I resigned myself to not making money off of it a long time ago. So I try to be open-minded about that, and I really feel like the advent of file sharing and giving people access to those things in the way that, is it Brian that was talking about that?
Yeah. Yes.
That's something that I have been really interested in, because the historical implications of that are, I think, pretty profound. It's maybe one of the only ways that we can preserve those kinds of oral traditions or cultural traditions and other aspects of our history in the way that primary documents would have been preserved from diaries and other kinds of records in the past. So as a musician, as an artist, I try to be open to what that could afford me. I think that's how I think about it. Does that answer the question, Dana?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I think it's really exciting.
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, it's really exciting what you say about sort of preserving different voices and people whose works would not necessarily be recorded in other ways. I mean, like copyright's a social disease and all that. And like, so much of films that are made and produced by machines and industry and so on and so forth, that's, like being distributed for all sorts of economic and political reasons. But it's really exciting to think about how, the model that you're describing could become more of the new norm in the long term. What do you think about that as somebody who produces music on a really sort of, having, substantial scale, like what, everybody does have a keyboard and does put their stuff up on Bandcamp. I mean, how do you think that changes things?
I could only kind of hear what you were saying.
It wasn't very well. It wasn't very well formulated. Just something about if we move more to a model like Bandcamp or just broadly distributed file sharing, what does that mean for the production of culture and the accessibility of it? If you have, all of us in this room having a keyboard and making our own sounds, as
right.
opposed to, right?
I really think that it forces artists to have to reconsider what their practice is, because as far as I'm concerned, with an iPhone in your hand, you can practically be a musician who is writing and recording music, and you can practically practice photography on some kind of serious level, and you can practically make films and all of those things. And so it flattens the practice of making art so much that it forces us to reconsider what our work actually means to our audience, and how we identify with that in a way that's honest. And so for me, when I realized that was what's happening, I started to make more of a focus on performance, and I felt like that was the only way to create some kind of experience that was both unique for myself and for the audience, and that transcended the approach of just making a record. Because the record is this very intimate process that's really important, but at the end of the day, what is it that keeps us kind of connected with one another in a way that's really meaningful? I don't know if it's the music that I record per se. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
I just think that it forces us to be more interdisciplinary than at any time in the past.
True.
You guys kind of touched on a few things, but maybe we can delve deeper into the preservation aspect of digital preservation, like who's preserving and who is being preserved, whether it's I know digital pragmata in libraries, in academic institutions. There's giant discussions about how we're going to handle preserving the plethora of things that are online, like Internet Archive, and then there's also our personal efforts to preserve our stuff. How do we find what's worthwhile, and is that in itself limiting?
So I could talk about this for hours. All asleep and bored and throwing pencils at me. But I thought the really sort of interesting, exciting word in the question was the we part of it. It's basically who's the we. I mean, is it academic institutions? Is it communities of people? And who are we preserving the stuff for? Are we preserving our own art for ourselves, for posterity, for making money? And it's really, really problematic. And so when you hear libraries talking about this sort of thing, you automatically have to kind of wonder, okay, well, what are we preserving? Is it really worth preserving?
Who is it for? Yeah. How is it going to be used? Yeah, there's a million questions. And my questions now are more of what organizations or institutions can I partner with, can I reach out to in order to preserve the information that is being created now by the people I work with. So as opposed to information that is like that John might work with, that is purchased through large databases, or information that is purchased already from scholars or researchers. A lot of the community I work with are creating things, but it's not being preserved, and we also don't have the resources for it. So it's, how do I work with other institutions or find grants or money? Money is the big issue, in order to kind of start preserving the work that's being created by individuals who don't have a name, or the multiple degrees behind their name, to have that be included in a collection that's going to be preserved.
I think. No, please.
When I was thinking about this topic, I can never help but think about that scene at the beginning of the film WALL-E, where he's wandering through all of this mass of material waste, and I think that there already is this entire kind of wasteland that's left behind in things like Facebook, for example. I mean, I am very sentimental, and so when Facebook first started and I was involved with it pretty early on, I would like print all of the pages from Facebook that had all of my messages and my interactions, and I did that with email, and I eventually developed this giant Rubbermaid container just full of papers. And some of that stuff was very meaningful and on the same level with a letter or any other kind of correspondence like that. But then other things were just really quick and ephemeral things that were practically like a text message. And so I'm really interested in the greater historical aspects of preservation, but also like, what does that mean for us as individuals, because we can't hold on to those things in the ways that we have in the past. Some of us will take photos and put them into our cameras and onto our hard drives and maybe never interact with them again. So it's just something I think about a lot.
I too was thinking about that. I was traveling this summer, and I saw a lot of people, myself sometimes included, taking photos as opposed to looking at the view. And I thought that was like really sad but interesting, to see the Eiffel Tower and just like and like take 50 photos, and but not really just stand there for 5 minutes and just stare at it. Like, actually be there, and instead of like, oh, I'll just take this photo and then like, I'll look at it later, and then I'll be like, whoa, like, how was that? and I was totally doing that because I wanted to look at these photos later and be like, yeah, like I was there. But to break down the screen in front of me was something that I had to think about, which is dumb, I guess. But it was something that was like, I was more conscious of as I went to tons of touristy places and saw just like quick photo and then like walk right away and just like, oh, it's just something like, oh, I might want to look at this later.
My thing, I feel like I'm wondering how much trust we actually are putting into these different platforms. So I do feel like we have a lot of different options of like digital archiving with things like Flickr, things like Dropbox, and just those different platforms, and even Instagram where we can save our images. But I feel like there's a lot of trust that's being put into those platforms, and not everyone is reading into the fine print of how those things are being, archived. Because, say for instance, like with Instagram, as soon as you upload an image, it's no longer your ownership. They own an image. So I'm just wondering about like how much trust like we're putting into all these different platforms, and feeling like we own this, like, oh, my picture's saved online, I own this, and it's there, and it's going to be there. But we're not actually looking into all the fine print of like who's actually owning it, how long is it going to stay there really, when they shut down and it's gone for good. So I'm just really curious about that aspect.
I have to say that thinking about that and saving things on Flickr or what have you, I worry about that somewhat, but I get one thing that sort of gets in kind of the second part of the question about who's preserving, who's doing it. Maybe it's more a matter of how, I guess. Like once it's out there on the internet, whatever, people, friends, family, free to copy it, download it, whatever. But I find that I engage with my memories more actively when I post-process photos than I ever did with printed photos. You know, take the roll down to, Kroger, get it printed out, and stick it in a book, and there's those memories on a shelf. Whereas now I have some really great memories of awesome garbage cans and things like that photos of, and that I spent time with. And then, so I would like to think that, when I'm old and lying on my deathbed, I will think back to that awesome garbage can. But I had the real process and the photo of it. Whereas the actual photo, I don't know. I mean, if I were to I look at pictures now from when I was 10, I'm like, it was a table. I don't remember that table at all. I don't care. But I remember art projects from when I was 10, paste, popsicle sticks, and all that. So,
I think going on what you said, something I've noticed too is that, when you start kind of creating little pockets and places where you're distributing your information, whether it's your photographs, your text, annotating a bibliography, and you're like, okay, let me save this here, let me save this article here. I think in some ways, for me, I find it makes me intellectually lazy because, like what you were saying with the photograph, I'm not processing it in the moment. I'm like, I'm going to get to this later. I'm not going to look at this now. I'm not going to read this article. I'm not going to digest it. I'm not going to actually understand what this person sent me. I'll look at it later, and that may or may not happen, and I'm not in the moment. I'm not present in the moment. So maybe kind of opposite of what you said, but going along with some of your ideas of, I don't know what that does when you're just focused on preserving it and saving it and not experiencing that moment.
I wanted to mention something about those things because in the past, when MySpace was something that people used, I used MySpace to keep up with all of the shows that I was booking and to keep in touch with artists that I felt like were interesting when I was on tour. And I made the mistake of having my calendar, my ongoing calendar, which you had to really painstakingly kind of profile on MySpace to convey what your upcoming shows were. I made the mistake of letting that be the conduit for all of my events. And so at some point, something happened to my profile and it crashed, and all of those events were gone. And it was like losing all of the things that are on your resume. And I mean, I had played probably hundreds of shows all over different parts of the country, and they were just gone. I couldn't remember what they were. I hadn't written all of them down, and that was a really hard experience about this topic of preservation. So I just thought that would be interesting to add because I have a friend who created this entire curated website called Open Space Wilderness, where he has all of these MySpace accounts that have gone untouched for 6 years or more. And he has created the opportunity for people to interact with those dead websites as foragers or as predators. And it's an entire frontier unto itself of those forgotten conduits of information and of people's thoughts and experiences that I think is something worth looking at, and also is a great commentary on this conversation, this topic here.
That kind of speaks to the question of inadvertent preservation. Sometimes, you can put something online and forget about it. And I was going through boxes the other day, and I found the internet. I found the internet in 1998 when I printed pages out, like back from like several like versions ago of myself, things that I was interested in back then. That those pages are gone. They were gone 5 years ago. They were gone 10 years ago, and foraging through them, it wasn't the same as looking at somebody else's MySpace pages, but I was interacting with a younger version of myself that wasn't quite comfortable. It wasn't anything horrible, but just really different music and tastes and everything.
Yeah, and I think we talk a lot about like foreign digital content, like like Twitter, like as an avid user of Twitter, and that like generates like so many tweets per second, and like people thought they could like keep scrolling and go back to like the very first tweet, and there was such a demand for like older tweets that you can now download like your archive from the very beginning, because it's not unlimited scrolling. It stops at a certain point because they just can't keep up with the sheer volume of it. But in addition to that, we're also digitizing things and adding things that were once physical and making them into digital content. So like in going in that scheme of things, like what's the relationship between like analog and digital modes of production, or is there a definite relationship? Are they opposing necessarily, or do they go together?
So this is something that like I'm really passionate about digital preservation. I think it's something I'm very interested in, and I think a lot of the analog stuff can be represented digitally. I think that's just like something natural or organic, that like ebooks look like books kind of, and albums listen like like the reason an album is about 30 minutes long, 40 minutes long is because that's how long an LP is. That's just a technology. But think about, it wouldn't be like that, and that people still produce albums that length because that's just what it is. That's just how we do it. But it wouldn't have been like that if digital came first, or we weren't making albums yet. You could make an album that was 3 hours and it'd fit on your cell phone. And but I think that turning things into digital is something that can be really worthwhile. And you could argue that the quality is lesser, but I would then argue that it's there and that there's at least something. A cassette tape will only, science has shown, it's going to degrade. Like it does. It's just a magnetic strip that can't hold data forever. Same goes for video game cartridges and all of that stuff. And but putting them into a digital form, it's really easy to go on the internet today and find a file that's 30 years old and use it. And I think that's like, I don't know what the future lies as far as what files and technology will look like, but as of right now, I think it's pretty promising. I would hope that you can scan a book, you can scan a comic, you can rip it LP, and just keep it around. And something I'm super interested in and have participated in as well.
I know one of the things in terms of the relationship between analog and digital modes of production or of presenting information or materials is that really working with the digital divide, I have to advocate for multiple modes of production because that increases access to more people. And so in a large public urban library, you cannot make that big of a shift to saying we're going to kind of force people along to digital materials, to ebooks, to e-readers. There's the access issue, there's the comfort issue, and so then you have to have redundancy of having maybe the same, I hate to say 50 Shades of Grey, online, print, large print, and so I think having the multiple forms of production increases access to people until I think we can find a better way to bring more people into the online or the digital space in terms of having people be able to have the access to the information and to use it. And yes, they do ask for 50 Shades of Grey in every format.
this goes back along the lines of access, and I'm just, even though I'm a web designer and my life is very digital, I feel like for some reason I still have more control over what I'm doing when I'm dealing with physical files. I always print out everything that I'm doing, whether it's photography or a design piece. I always print out and have it archived somewhere else. So I'm still thinking in terms of like, I feel like I have more control over this and where I'm going to put it, instead of just uploading it to a server where I don't really have control over where they're putting it. So I kind of go back and forth on how I feel, how safe I am with physical items and then the digital. So I still feel like we have to have multiple ways we archive our stuff, because they're all subject to destruction in some kind of way. So I still feel like, even though we're all going digital, there's still a lot of people that are more comfortable with having their physical forms and having things that they know are just going to be there, and they see it and it's there, rather than this kind of mystery about things being off on the internet, and that makes a lot of people wary of having everything that they own on the internet. So I feel like there's still a lot of push and pull with that still too.
And I wonder if maybe some of you might have something to say about this, but is there like an experiential element too? You guys were talking about being in the moment, but in handling vinyl, and to go with music as an example, or being up close and seeing the actual lumps of paint on a canvas, and instead of a scan, which just can kind of flatten it depending on how it's handled. And I know Brian, you do a lot of stuff like sets. That is it's just a nostalgia thing, or is it also the hipster way of going back? Is that a way to slow us down in a little bit to enjoy things, the tactile nature of things still? It also goes with zines.
I can start again.
Yeah.
I think that she was discussing her music, and she said you said you have a record label that puts out a cassette. Is that right?
What you said?
A cassette of your music.
I do. I have, and vinyl as well.
And I think that is really awesome, in that you have a band. You test out music before you want to own it. For me, I own too much stuff. I own a lot of cassettes and records and comics and zines, but for me there is an experience there. But I think it's something I buy my favorite albums analog, because there is something different. It's something that digital can't reach, but it's there is something special too for me personally that I do really enjoy putting down a needle or putting in a cassette tape. Just a sound that isn't there digitally, but I think that, at least production-wise, I think it's becoming, the kid who's going to download the thing is going to be more likely to probably buy your record. Spinning a record is an investment, especially today. But records are back. I read an article just the other day that the biggest record production company in the Czech Republic does a lot of ones for Europe and can't handle what people are ordering, and it's just they're buying old machines because they can't buy a new one. There's no new and they're trying to keep up, but it's just really hard for them. And it's totally this curve. People experience digital and then was just here's something that we're missing and that we don't really enjoy.
And I think there's some learning effects too that have been documented in the education field. I know that I've read a number of studies that when, this is one of my textbooks for this semester, if you read it in this format, your comprehension is going to be more than if you're reading it from a device. It's just, there's something, they've done some studies, it's preliminary, but they have found that people are able to retain more information, and maybe it is with our comfort with this format, with the passing the pages, being able to highlight, to write, to annotate, that while you have those features in a lot of e-readers, I don't know if it's an issue of comfort, if it's an issue of familiarity, but I do think it also affects how we learn and how we absorb information in different formats.
whether I'm consuming or making, either way, and it's a completely different thing. I mean, if I'm writing a short story on, Microsoft Word, that flows a certain way. If I'm writing it by hand in my book, that is a completely different story, and I can do, different styles. I have more time to consider my words. And likewise when I'm consuming, I bought a Kindle last year, and it's just a different experience reading on that than it is on that. I would say not better or worse as far as I'm concerned, but definitely different. And maybe it started out as a fetish, the whole, I'm going to sit around and listen to my vinyl records now, but what does it matter why it's there if it changes your experience of the work? I mean, if it makes you feel better to wear like a smoking jacket and sit there with a pipe and put on your vinyl and whatever. I mean, if that's what makes the experience, then it's legit.
We've done a lot of talking about like the space and the materials. To turn inward, what does your digital self look like, and what does it create? Like if there was like a film or a picture or a portrait of your digital self, like
And you can probably test mine. Mine is going to be what I'm studying, what I'm doing at work, what I've cooked, and my dog. That's sort of my digital self. That's my narrative. So it's pretty much in those categories. I don't know how you guys feel when you're living in some of that space, what you tell about yourself, the stories you tell about your life, your experiences.
It'd be hilarious and probably unsettling if there was some sort of software out there that could like take your browsing history and like generate a portrait of you for your browsing history.
Yeah, that would be disturbing.
Your most commonly used files, how long you have them open,
Your Google searches.
what if all that stuff. Or if all of us on this panel died today, right? I mean, if they took a look at our computer and tried to articulate us from that, like how would what we use on our own computer differ from our online habits? Both of them are digital, they're just different digital.
This is kind of like the zine that I made once that Celina brought up, in which I had this idea where I collect all everything I put out digitally that I thought I couldn't get rid of it even if I wanted to, kind of just like a Facebook post and like I delete it later, still like kind of there, as I mentioned, and or text messages that go to somewhere and then something, like they're still kind of in the, so I had this idea that I would collect them all and put together a timeline of my whole day. And so one day I was like, all right, I'm going to do research into this day 3 days ago. I'm just going to do it. And so I did all my research, all my internet searching, all my last FM listening, everything that I did, and I put it into into a zine, physical zine. And you can kind of read through my day and kind of get a feel for how I interacted with certain people, and so it's kind of the idea of my digital self, I guess, or like something that you could look back on my life and be like, who is this? Like, you could put together for anyone, and a lot of people, it's kind of interesting, I guess, the kind of like looking at a third person of myself and seeing the language I used and stuff like that, and just how insincere some of it was. But I would say all my digital self is like, I would say it's also a lot of like, what I put out there can be, what I expected just one person to see as opposed to what I expected a ton of people to see, and that's all in the all my text and stuff. So like things I'm saying to my best friend are different than my Facebook status, which I make myself really cool, it's hilarious. My Instagram is killing it. and so
I like that idea a lot. It's not like the question of digital self. Like I read that and I thought about that. I looked at the stare at the ceiling in the middle of the night. It's like, it's like we have digital selves, and I feel like it's a lot easier to externalize that in the digital world than it is in person. I mean, even more so with colleagues of mine who have different sort of like racial issues that they face in their day-to-day work, who I talk to on Facebook, who deal with, in one example I can think of, sort of discrimination in publishing, and how they talk about it in person versus what their public message on their blog or website is. And I think that must be frustrating. Well, from conversations we've had, both frustrating and liberating to be able to talk about things even though you have to keep them separate in certain ways, or choose to, if that's the one.
Compartmentalized, depending on the platform and depending on the audience that you're trying to, you want to have a certain image. I think we all cultivate a certain image that we want to present, via the different programs that we use. And you're not going to be writing, I can't sleep again tonight, I'm going to feel like crap tomorrow morning, this is going to be a bad day. You're going to write, oh, today's an awesome day, I'm going to meet so-and-so for lunch. So, I think there's always that we're kind of editing ourselves while we're creating and pushing out that information in order to create a certain persona for the public.
Leads back to like that depression statistic that Dana shared. Like, we're all sharing like the best version of ourselves, or versions in whatever circles, and our wittiest selves, and we see other people being funny and happy, and but we're like, but I'm not really. Yeah, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I kind of did. I think that something that relates to that is just the phenomenon of how we curate all of our experiences to kind of shape the discourse around our work and around the narrative of our lives. And I think that that's something that when you become aware of it, it's humorous, and it becomes a commentary on yourself from outside of yourself, which is strange, but I just think that that's something worth considering too in regards to those things, because while it is sort of this best representation of who we are, that's what's shaping our culture a lot right now. That sense of place in that digital sphere.
I just had a really great idea. We have a group social experiment art project where we all just post like the shittiest stuff that's happened to us. Like, damn it, I stepped in dog poop again. And then 1.1 billion people start feeling better about themselves. We can change the world. Like, just yeah. It's like, I ran out of milk and I still have milk. Yeah. It's up to us. We can do it.
There was this girl in Philadelphia who had this profile on OkCupid that was completely farcical. It was her photo of herself was actually just a picture of her neck, and she acted like this kind of psychopath that men would approach her to talk to her about who she was, and she would make something up. And it was just this strange thing where she had total control over who she was and herself in the context of that sphere, but she was also kind of making these social commentaries on the way that men behave towards women, and it was a project, and it was something that got a good amount of attention, and so it fits in with that art project that we should all do too.
I think we're just talking about like social media, but the internet has up, and before social media became really a huge thing, Friendster, I guess was like and but before, I mean, you could exist on the internet in a digital self without being you, and I wonder if anyone has, and I would say like I definitely have. I have usernames that are me, like people who I have usernames that like people like see me across different sites and be like, I know who that guy is. but that's that goes for I guess gaming, internet forums. I love internet forums, and I think it's partially because I can I don't know anyone. I don't know anyone. You can be talking to like a 60-year-old grandma, and we could still just be having this conversation about whatever the topic is, you know, like reading a blog post on the internet. I don't know. It all depends, and I think there's something like really awesome that is like, I don't know if any of you have experienced or been completely anonymous, you know, like you have friends that you'll never know in real life, or friend that none of your real I go to this website and I don't know anyone else that goes to it. It's just like a niche little internet forum with a few hundred people or something. I don't know. There's something special to me about that. I like existing in these niches in the internet.
Can you speak up a little bit? Nelly's having trouble
Oh, sorry.
hearing.
Just existing in like small little niches on the internet, where you don't really know anyone in real life, but you still can interact and chat and accomplish something, I guess. Or have any of you ever done anything?
It's so exciting to be anonymous.
I almost look at the internet as being like the extensive version of yourself, and I feel like there's a lot more comfortableness of being on the internet because you have like a lot more control and edit instantly over what you're going to say or who you're going to be, rather than like if I was meeting someone and I'm trying to size up their demeanor and what I'm going to say and how I'm going to present myself to them. There's a lot, less of what I may say to them up front than how I would present myself online in like a bio or something that may be a more extensive version, and then they could just pick and choose from that what they want to know from me, instead of me trying to explain everything that they may not want to hear, like, oh, I like to cook this kind of food and I like this and this is, all those kinds of things that they may just want to like blurt out because it may not be interesting to them. So I feel like it's definitely like a longer version of self when you're online.
I think it's interesting how personalities come out, and I think you can attest to that through professional listservs. When you're following, a lot of times I may not be the person to comment, but I'll read what other people write, and after a while you get a feel for different in our world librarians and their personalities. I've never met these people in my life, but it's like, oh, she's commenting again. It's going to be some nasty comment, and she's going to be calling somebody out on this, and this person's super helpful. If I send them a question, they'll answer within 2 minutes. And so those personalities come out in a very anonymous way, but then you get to know, I only know them from their email address, but like, I know who that is, Just from the way they interact in an email listserv, responding to other people's professionals' questions.
I encounter that in sort of the variations of people online in different spheres. I used to do a lot more anonymous or less like specifically me stuff when I first got on the internet, or even like, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. But these days, like between full-time work as a librarian, like maintaining sort of a side career as a writer, and then sort of other like general sort of art online or other stuff, I don't have enough time that I want to spend it online being anonymous generally. It's fun. I like it, right? It's just like at the end of the day, I'm like, my wrists hurt, my eyes hurt, and I can look you back.
Do any of you guys feel like you, like, especially like now, if you go on like YouTube, it's like trying to like merge like different things are trying to merge different accounts and identities. Like, oh, I see you have an account here. As the digital landscape keeps on like altering and absorbing and removing other things, do you guys feel like you're kind of like trying to adapt or redefine your work or what you choose to put out there? Are you more tentative or?
I will never forget the day a friend of mine, who I will not name, who is a well-published author, just dropped a profanity-laden rant on Facebook because Amazon had just bought Goodreads. And he was so angry because as much as he liked Amazon for various reasons, he liked having something separate that wasn't about selling books. I mean, he was an author, but there was some notional divide. And he's never been the same since. At least it's good.
Well, I think for me, it's a challenge just to keep up, like you said, the ever-evolving landscape, the ever-arriving platforms and products for us to try and to use, to play with them, to become familiar, because I know that's what folks I interact with, either professionally or my patrons, are using, and so I need to know what's out there. I need to know what people are interacting with, and now I feel so old, like, oh, no one does with that anymore. We're all on this now, and so it's like, wow, okay, so you're how old? 14, and you don't even, you're using this now. So I think it's a challenge just professionally to keep up with what's out there in order to better serve my clients, really.
I would like to add that I think that as individuals, it becomes it's really draining. That's the easiest way to say it. But I think that when you spend a lot of time trying to sort of conform yourself to those containers of your identity, you end up feeling really spread thin. I have this practice of going through all of my friends on Facebook regularly and assessing if that person is really my friend and trying to understand what my relationship with them is, and deleting people that I wouldn't invite over to my house, for example, and trying to be honest with myself in that way. And I think that those kinds of assessments about what the role of those tools are in our lives is something that is really difficult to reconcile, because we spend so much time interacting with those things and trying to spread our narrative through that. It's exhausting.
I think it's really interesting the importance of being a friend on Facebook. I've had people delete me from Facebook, and I'm like, wow, that's the least thing you can do as far as interaction. The smallest thing you can do is just be my friend on Facebook. If you delete me, I know you seeked it out and did it. And that means should I even say hi?
Insulting.
Yeah, but it's interesting that it has so much power to be like, oh, they don't even want to even let me be able to be in contact or see their. So I don't know. It's really interesting that I've never deleted anyone on Facebook. Really, I just kind of think I just have a ton of friends from whatever how many years it's been, and just I don't really care. Just let it keep doing, whatever.
I feel the same way. It's a step, big time. I mean, unfriend.
Yes.
You can hide, you can unfollow, you can do so many different things. It might be for the first time I did unfriend somebody. But yeah, a week or so. They were professionally problematic. They were draining my energy. Every time they wrote something, it made me like humanity less. So it was kind of definitely that was an extreme case. And I had
And I've had people remove Facebook friends to preserve the physical friendship. Or I just can't know you online. And that's a really interesting aspect of it. One more and I'm going to kind of cobble together two questions before asking them to maybe ask you guys some questions. But in this creating of identities and we have to answer questions about ourselves and kind of fit into different categories or reveal what categories we could fit into. Do you think these are becoming more standardized terms, or the way we describe ourselves, or in addition to that, going along with in terms of self-determination, having to try to make those decisions that maybe you wouldn't have made before, and be accountable in ways that you wouldn't have been before? Kind of giant question there.
I guess that's hard because so much, I don't know if for you guys it's the same thing, but so much of what I do online, the professional melds right in with the personal, and I think now if I were to maybe do things over again, I would want to have a professional persona for some things and a private one for friends, but again, so many of my friends are in my profession that it's really hard to tease that out and to have the separate silos. So, there might be something I'll say personally that could offend someone professionally, like I never meant to do that, but you're connected to me in all these different platforms. So I don't know if you guys have the same experience, that it's just because we're so we're so intertwined, it's kind of hard to tease out the different parts of our personalities.
Something for me about these things that are standardized that we use to talk about ourselves that I think is interesting and that I feel a little bit leery of, and not in a way that it's a conspiracy theory or anything, but traditionally when you see that kind of approach to defining people, like ethnically, for example, it leads to pretty bad results, because I think of those kinds of standardizations of people in Rwanda or in Bosnia, because that I've been to those places and studied their history so much, and what that led to on the other side was genocide, because it was so easy to characterize and classify people for their religious or their religious persuasions or their ethnical backgrounds. And so I think that it's interesting to think about that, how we identify ourselves and how we sort of stake our claim to that, and whether or not that puts us in any kind of strange territory. Just the way that I wonder about how strange it is that if I say that I'm at a location using Facebook and somebody knows where I am, can they find me? Like, I've identified myself that way. I've allowed people to leave me kind of vulnerable, and I think that's, I don't know, that's something I think about sometimes too.
I'm kind of interested about what it has done to the analog world. Whether it's people finding you based on where you are, or people just kind of, we all like people walking around looking at their phone or whatever. But I think people consciously craft an analog identity now, more so in some cases than they did before, because it's an alternative. You can sit on your phone at your computer all day long and never really articulate a clear sense of your clothing, or the way that you speak, or the way that you make a book, or the way that you do whatever it is you do in real life. And I encounter this all the time with people I know who've chosen as writers to do only to do hand-bound books, or only to do limited print runs of analog of art and never make a digital version of it or something like that. And it's kind of interesting to me in ways that I never expected to be before. I mean, do you kind of I know you do multimedia installations. How does that play with the single object that's not reproduced?
Right. I mean, it kind of goes back to what Nelly was talking about. I'll get my music out for free, and then I'll make my money back through event ticket sales or something. And then I think a lot about, and you guys speak it for all of us. What's the appeal to the I think you were talking about, are we all just nostalgic? Is that why record players? I mean, technically inferior. And so I'm really curious. I deal with that as an instructor a lot. People bring up my students bring up the idea of nostalgia. They're this is about nostalgia, and it's dude, you're 12. What are you nostalgic for? But Instagram is huge, and Instagram is a program that messes up your photos. You take a perfect photo with an epic camera on your iPhone or whatever, and then you launch a program that messes it up. But technically, if you ask Kodak or something, they'd be yes, the corners and needs some darker, completely artificially enhances the contrast, whatever. But yeah, that's, and we're all the LPs, I read that statistic too, but last year was the first year that digital music sales plateaued or started to decrease, and that LP sales started to increase. So that little crossover, it's what's the draw? Are we all having this violent whiplash reaction to wait a minute, I need to hold something again?
But in the publishing world, you have both going up exponentially. You've got e-books and print books that continue to go. People tell me all the time, oh, well, you know, aren't you guys going to be out of a job soon? There aren't going to be any books. I'm like, no, there are more published every day than the day before, than the year before. It's insane how many more books are published in the print format in addition to the e-format. So they're both, it's like this curve going up. It's not going down at all.
Not to overtalk, but I will say, without naming names, I know, for instance, like some anthologies that fellow writers might have contributed to. You know, they have wound up having an all-male cast of authors. This is problematic for all the reasons you would think of. Whereas other fellow writers of mine, the female, have in some cases done great things with crowdfunding or, you know, similar mechanisms to that has, like, you know, the identity would, like, without that, have become so much more standardized in really unpleasant ways. But the online has sort of made it so much more possible. I mean, the Twitter feminism, we can talk all night long about that, but, you know.
Is there, if anyone on the panel is like bilingual, like does that kind of intersect at all with the creation of like identities? Like,
I think that's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of the Latino professionals I'm connected to have very, very, very professional personas they've created for fear of being judged more harshly or for having to overcome maybe certain stereotypes and obstacles. And so they really, I do too, we really restrict what we say because, okay, we're not going to touch this race issue. We're not going to touch this thing that just happened because people are going to say immediately, oh, of course she said that, she's Hispanic. You know, so I think we're very guarded in that form because we don't want to be seen as you're complaining because you're a minority or you're saying this because you're a woman. And so, and a woman Hispanic, you know, so I think that intersection of gender, ethnicity, and the online persona can be problematic because we do a lot of self-censorship for not being judged harshly by the establishment in our profession. And that's, it's hard. And then I have some friends that have said, screw it. And they are like, this is who I am, take it or leave it. And they have been quite successful, but they're also maybe in California, you know? So they're not in Virginia. So
I think that we get the opportunity to have a little bit of the barrier of inhibition that we would normally experience when we're interacting with people in person lifted because of that, like, hint of anonymity, if only a hint. So it ends up being an opportunity as much as it could be a vice for us.
So I'm going to turn to you guys. Does anyone have any questions for the panelists, or do the panelists have any questions? Give me a second to think about it.
I was noticing how y'all were talking a lot about being scared and fear, and I just wanted to maybe like have a moment for y'all to speak more about fear and being scared as like a body interacting with things that are not necessarily part of your body. This like digital space, like what is that fear coming from, and like what is it you're scared of? Like not necessarily an apocalypse scenario, but like if you're scared of something, and like is it the sense of loss of things not being like physical and then gone forever, or?
I think that in this digital age, in the past 20, 25 years, something like that, the scare of losing memories and like the discussion of nostalgia is something that is like extremely brought up a lot. Like, why do you think the 90s are such a big deal? Like, was it really like that like great? Irrelevant, but like, did every other decade have? It wasn't as preserved. I mean, I think that it's because 25-year-old kids are posting on the internet about this stupid TV show and being like, this was the greatest show ever. You're like, okay, like what about, like what about, it's just because my parents, like do my parents like look back on like TV shows that they watched as a kid and like rewatch them all the time? No, it's because they didn't have access to it and they learned to just like, whatever, like, it's in the past, and I think that there's a lot of fear in just because of how surrounded we are by everything all the time, that like fear of losing everything, like from something as simple as an email you once wrote to, because we're so used to keeping everything, especially, I don't know, but on topic, I'm not really,
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think technology has caused us to be very forgetful too. So I feel like just, our access of just having everything at once all the time and you just click on it and go to it has made us not have to remember, memories or certain situations as, easily as we could have, like say in the 90s where you have something happens and you remember it and that's just the way it went and you have that memory. But I feel like now, since everything is so instant, we don't have to think about things in that way anymore because we can just revisit this file or revisit, anything online. So I feel like it plays a large role in like our memory. And I feel like even I'm like really forgetful because my phone just, spells everything for me, and I don't have to, like, people may be forgetting, like, learning how to spell, and I feel like it's very true.
Something for me that's a part of my experience is that, and maybe I can speak for the other panelists, but I began the first part of my life without anything like this. I mean, the TV was the only media that I would have interacted with for a while until I was about, I think, 8 or so. And so I think that it would be interesting to know if that kind of digital anxiety that you sense has to do with being someone that bridges those two realms of having lived with only analog experiences and then trying to translate that into digital ones and what that means for us as individuals.
I'm afraid of losing who I am, both in terms of...
I can't hear you. Sorry.
I would say I'm afraid of losing who I am, both in terms of, waking up at the end of the day. Like, how it is when you spend time on the computer and suddenly 3 hours are gone and you meant to go to the store and read a book and smell a rose and whatever. So there's that side of it. And the other side of it is that, I have any number of family members who've gotten older, and who have had sedentary habits and who maybe are not as healthy as they could be. And there's a whole generation of kids right now who spend a lot of time on the computer. I'm not sounding like a jerk, but sitting at the computer, theoretically not as healthy as running around in the field, beating the ground with sticks like we used to do in the old days.
Anyone else have fears or questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So there's kind of this dichotomy stretching, I guess, the quantity of information that we have now versus the quality of information after the transition to digital and the digital age and the internet. So I was just wondering what your guys' ideas were on how art has been affected this way. If we're slowly degrading the quality of the music we put on the internet or the art we upload there just because there's more of it and there's a greater access for anyone to make any of this stuff. So, just ideas.
I feel like that's really interesting that you say that because I was thinking sort of along these terms not too long ago just with photography because before I went to VCU, I used to do a lot of film, and I didn't have a digital SLR until I guess my junior year at VCU, and I felt like back when I was just doing film, I thought a lot more about what I was going to capture and how I sized up, images a lot more. And I put a lot of time into those pieces, whatever the roll of film, I guess 24 shots. Well, when I got the digital camera, I could just do anything I want to and just, make how many ever mistakes I want instantly and just edit that instantly. And so I feel like my work has definitely changed because of that access of just being able to do it instantly and as many times as I want. And it was very strange for me to just go through that and see like how instant that was. And I was just making a lot of things that just didn't really make sense because I could. So I felt like that really affected my work.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be quality. Maybe it's increased the diversity. I don't know. I go back and forth. I was actually hoping to find some clarity myself on that today. You could anyone who wants can put stuff out there, and then whether or not you care to try to measure up or to assign a qualitative value to something, that's your own call, right? If I say my picture is better, he says his picture is better. Whose is actually better? Is it if you look at it and if you assign it or whatever? And then there's there's something for everyone online, and so it's definitely if you're B and I'm A or whatever, then there's so many more values between us now because there's so much more stuff online. And then I went back to think there's so many dark corners of the internet, and I know about stuff now that I never even imagined I could know about or existed.
You can't unknow those things.
But yeah, that's for sure. But then I just wonder if those breed. If those, I don't know, it was furries, right? I never knew about furries and I knew about furries, right? But then now my interest in furries is growing and maybe your interest in furries is growing. But what if we didn't have the internet and I never knew about furries, but maybe I would come up with scalies or something, right? But now I don't because now I know about furries, and so did that potential idea die because I saw this thing? Is the internet breeding diversity or is it destroying diversity? That's just another question that I thought of when you asked your question. Scalies. So I'm sorry, new club later.
I think that quality is really subjective, especially in a digital age where you can, whoever scroll up that iPhone, you can do anything. I mean, there is movies that, what's the director's name? This is not a film, directed completely on his iPhone. It's a really, really good, amazing film, movie, whatever you want to call it. And I think that goes for music too. Music is something you can record at your friend's house and it can sound just like a studio. You can be really impressed, and I think that's kind of amazing. And but I think, I just think quality is really subjective. And I was saying is that you put it up on the internet, there's going to be someone who might be I like the way that you recorded your guitar through your iPhone. I think that's cool or something like that.
I saw another hand. Let's get he at it first. Yeah.
I guess this kind of plays into the aspect of fear a little bit, but just as people of a certain age or elderly who aren't able to transition into digital life like everybody else. My dad got my grandpa phone and he gave me the phone recently and said, sell this and make some money off this. I don't need it. Do you think that people who were born with a general understanding of digital technology, or people our age who just can get a phone that's different from the phone they have and basically understands the functions of it, do you think we're going to be able to continually transition because digital technology is going to keep advancing but stay in the same basic plateau? Or are we going to reach a point where there's an entirely new group of people in this same situation talking about technology and we're all the ones on the outside who have no idea what's going on?
Well, that was one of the first things I opened up with, my fear of that growing gulf where I can potentially see with the platforms, with the technology changing so rapidly and being really in the hands of a few small creators, and then the access being limited to those who can afford it, you're really going to see the people who don't have the resources or the access have a larger and larger gulf. And then what does that mean for them in terms of access to jobs, to quality of life. So that is a big thing that I think about a lot, and it scares me because I can see kids that are coming up right now that should, by any definition, be very well versed and very adept at these technologies, but because they don't have the financial resources, it's as if they were coming from another country that doesn't have them, or coming from from another language that doesn't have the words for this, because it's not something they'll have access to. So I see that a lot, and that does scare me.
It changes things from the original intent of the internet, perhaps, where we had opportunities for things to be free and shared, and it has already begun to shift in favor of classes that can afford those things and that can have access to all of these different elements. I think about that because now, with the way that things have gotten structured with sharing music, using things like Spotify or Amazon, for example, where you can stream almost anything, just because that you have a subscription of $10 a month or $70 a year, that changes things a lot for people that don't have access to those kinds of platforms, even if it's just on a social and kind of cultural layer. And I wonder about that because it shapes conversation a lot.
Yeah, I wonder a lot about our responsibility. It's okay, so a lot of things someone will ask a question and I'm I've got something to say about that, and then your perspective is extremely humbling, and I'm oh gosh, I'm complaining about these things, and you're talking about the have-nots, and I'm suddenly I'm wildly fortunate, and I was going to complain about something, and now I'm I just cannot.
Well, we all are. Everyone in this room
right.
is wildly fortunate. I mean, even to be having this conversation, I feel like we're part of a very small strata that not only can have discourse around it, that can have analysis, have deep, conversations and thoughts. Whereas some people, the barriers are so huge, and it's they don't even have the vocabulary for a conversation like this.
Or the energy.
Yeah. They're working 3 jobs.
The energy thing is kind of, interesting in a horrifying way. We haven't talked hardly at all about the ecological side of things, but obviously, down the road, every meaningful projection about the future of fossil fuels and all this. Yeah, there was an article that was circulated around a couple days back. That was a John Hopkins study, maybe, where there was sort of the first time there's enough data to do a meaningful study of the extent to which all of us can actually affect the political process compared to money interests, corporations, and these 2 sociologists, economists, what have you. If you go Google political ineffectiveness, poor people or something like that, all of us compared to them. The argument they made was basically that nobody who votes kind of via normal means can actually change government, which is sort of a horrifying thought to think about. Certainly in the context of all of what we've been talking about just now, it's lovely to think that, we'll be able to be fluent in new kinds of operating systems or new kinds of devices, and that we'll continue to have these abilities that evolve, but they are predicated on a certain amount of capital, which, from a pessimistic perspective, it's kind of hard to reliably expect we'll be there in 50 years.
Time and take one more question. I think you had your hand raised.
Yeah, it's not so much a question, but kind of a speaking point I'd like to hear you guys talk about. I read an article Time on Time's website about digital wills, and about sitting down with a lawyer to create your digital will, and talking about putting your the passwords for your profiles to give access to someone, or do you not want to give that access so that it will exist kind of until the website is gone. And I had a conversation with some people last night and brought that up and was talking about websites like findagrave.com, how they become these like digital memorials, and then speaking about like, will that replace going to a grave and placing flowers? We post like this flickering candle and like a sentiment, and the Facebook page is acting as like digital memorials, and kind of speaking about nostalgia and like what gets passed down is like you can get images from your parents, but then like in the future will be like passed down our digital profiles and digital media. I don't know, just wondering what you guys thought about that.
Maybe that's too.
If you had thoughts on it.
I've actually had a couple of friends pass away and had to confront what that really, what does that mean to me? And I think that's been a difficult thing for me to understand. So I've never heard of digital wills, but that's totally fascinating. And I think that if we could find ways to virtually commemorate those people so that when you go to their Facebook profiles, for example, and you see these photos of the last time that you looked at them, but that was 4 years ago. How do we reconcile those losses to the analog or the tactile world in a way that is actually consistent with our experiences here in that virtual realm? I don't really know what to think of that, but I think that it's something that would be interesting to explore, and that it should maybe happen.
I really identify with that comment in terms of the consistency between the digital and the analog, just because there's a guy I knew in library school, somewhat well, moderately well. He died, and I've had a lot of interaction with his Facebook page, just stuff coming up in my feed since he died some years ago, and it keeps going on. Like, I've had more interaction with his ghost persona than I actually ever really did with him in life, and it's really disturbing. And I don't know if there's a way to alter it. And I don't know who would I tell? Who would I say? You should do something about your dead son's online persona. I'm not going to say that to anybody. And yet, like societally, I think we should be intentional about how we communicate and deal with our digital remains, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly like the direct point that the digital will was like getting to, is that like for the sake of the families, and like respect for that person's digital persona is like they are no longer here, is that hurtful and emotionally difficult to kind of have them exist digitally. Yeah. So we should be able to like put that to rest. Yeah.
Are there any other people who wanted to respond to that?
I'm just curious, like, the digital will, like, what if, I don't know, it might be too personal to ask you, like, what you would do.
I'm like, my Tumblr is like really special to me, and it's like I've had it for 6 years now, so I think I probably would leave that. As for Facebook and other things, email, I don't feel so connected to, so I don't really care. Like, I would probably say, like, do what you want. If it's hurtful, and hard to have my like digital self as Facebook, but I would kind of want my like online journal life kind of to stay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious because like you'll be gone.
Yeah.
So like the sentiment now you have is interesting, but to come from your like, it's a dead guy interacting with me, and it's kind of creeping me out.
Yeah.
It's almost like you should have like a digital preemptive will. So like I'm not sure who would it be, like the parents who would say like no, like actually it's up to us. Like interacting with that actually, interacting with that is actually like that's us now.
You create a digital executor.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
It's like that. It's all exactly like a will, but it's just all digital. It's pretty crazy.
Yet another way that Facebook screws us. As much as I love it, I mean, like, I should not have to deal with that if I don't want to. I should be able to push a button that says, we're dead now. I'm not getting your stuff anymore.
What about deleting friends off of Facebook? It's like, how does that make you feel to have to say, like, I'm going to delete my past friend, like my dead friend and my dead whatever? And it's like that kind of like ethical, moral thing now on you, where you're like, I said bye to you, and now I have to say bye to you digitally. It's like,
and why isn't there a timeline? thing that says, my friend John Smith is dead.
Yeah, is that too morbid for us right now? Like,
it might, but it's even weird to go to his page and be like, oh, he did this, he went skiing here, he went, and
You have all the other milestones.
yeah.
That's like, myself and a lot of other people that I know have like agreements with people like before my family can get to my laptop and take it and destroy like people being very concerned about like what their browser history. These are things that we didn't have to give consideration to, or maybe some people did, but now we're just more aware of the shameful things we do, or not so shameful things we do, but we just don't want our parents to know about. And to share a personal story, when my father passed away, he kind of knew that he would, and before I won't say he knew it was like a big risk before he went into surgery, and he did alter a lot of his online profiles to like what he wanted to be left in remains. And my mom, when he passed away, my mom found it so morbid and creepy, she contacted like MySpace and other things and had them take it down. And so that's like another thing, like people can have like actions that for like their digital self to live on, that maybe the people who are remaining conflict with. Hello. So like there's still like the possibility that your wishes won't be met. So.
Just like, I guess, just the topic of Facebook and TED. The first time I had a friend die, I was 15 or 16, and I remember hearing about it, called at work, and I remember being, not knowing how to feel or whatever, and I remember going home to my computer in my bedroom and looking at his Facebook and just crying a lot, and scrolling through his pictures and stuff, and pictures of me and him, and I guess that's kind of weird to think about. That's what I did, but I think that, if I was to have my digital will, that's something I've never heard of. I kind of like Facebook for it. I look back on people's friends and pictures. It's nice to see these things that I don't have very many physical pictures of some of my close dead friends. But Facebook is kind of nice. I would maybe turn off my Facebook wall. That's a whole other conversation. But I don't know. There's something. Maybe just because I'm 22 and I'm not. Maybe my mom would not think it was so interesting or comforting. But I remember just being really saddened by seeing the pictures. But something that was it was nice to see pictures of him because I knew I would never see him again, and it was nice to support people.
I feel like it's kind of natural, right? I feel like it's kind of natural. I mean, you had tombstones that were, cement or whatever, some sort of art material, and with a name. And now we have whatever.
We can hear your last bit.
Oh,
Sorry.
just like how back in the day we were limited to chiseled stone, and now we have this incredible multimedia monument to them. We can watch videos of them. We can be I think that's kind of incredible.
It's still very weird to me because I feel like looking at a Facebook page, it's a lot more instant, but I'm wondering about the physical things, maybe if they were living at home still and you can go to their room, the last things that they had, I guess the reason why it may seem a little bit more strange online is because you can't really just put that away. You can put their things away, their clothes and their pictures away, pack that up somewhere, but online it's there and you have to kind of get in contact with people to take it off. So I think that's maybe why some people think it's strange. And I think I actually saw an article about Facebook creating these memorabilia pages. I think it's real now that you can create a page because
You can convert it.
yeah, because I have a page for my friend, and it's just all of his pictures and everybody that he used to be friends with, and all this stuff about like his history. And then I see myself on there with him, and then it's like a whole page dedicated to him. But the wall is just for saying, you know, I miss you, and it's just really wild how we're just going into like this realm where everything's just right in front of us.
Well, that I think we're out of time. Unfortunately, like we could talk. This is such a giant topic, and we barely touched on like so many things, and yet we touched on a lot of things. I think too. But this isn't the end of the discussion. We've recorded this, and we can continue the conversation online on the Facebook event page even. If there's more questions, like maybe we could all check in there. There's also going to be an art show later this semester where hopefully maybe some of you guys or other people who might pick up this zine about today or listen to the panel today online can respond to or delve into. And we've got flyers with the stuff there. So I just want to thank all of the panelists for making time to be here. Some at the very last minute, like they're all awesome people, and look up their stuff online. A lot of them have portfolios and websites. Stock their digital selves in the digital space. It sounds like crazy to talk about. Thank you all for coming, and thank GSEX and Dr. Brown and Art Mafia. If anybody here is interested in volunteering to be a part of Art Mafia, you are more than welcome to talk to Sophia, and she can hook you up with to get onto the list to know about future meetings and stuff like that. Thank you guys so much.